Hi, welcome to Nature Sketch Crate's Common Dandelion step-by-step painting instructions video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to paint the Common Dandelion using Nature Sketch Crate's step-by-step painting instructions. First, collect all your materials and make sure they're ready to go. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, have fun, and don't worry too much if you think you made a mistake. Let's get started. Step 1, transfer the image to the watercolor paper. So add some tape to the top of the transfer image and then tape it to the back of the watercolor paper. Press it down flat. Open it up and place your transfer paper, graphite transfer paper, dark side down, light side up. You can use this many times over and over and over. Just kind of smooth it down and then start anywhere you like. Any line. I like to start left to right. Just works well for me. Once you transfer a line or two, go ahead and check to make sure it's transferred. You'll want a darker line because it will help you at the end to draw in the lines in the last step. And just go through and trace over those lines. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a sketch. So if you make mistakes, don't worry too much. If you get interrupted, you can stop and put this to the side and come back to it at any time. And make sure just to kind of relax. Take your time drawing those lines. Put on some music or a podcast or maybe an audiobook and transfer the lines over. Go ahead and flip this up and down a few times once you think you've transferred all the lines to see if you've missed any. I always end up missing a couple. You don't have to worry about the image moving because it's taped to the top. And as long as your transfer paper is underneath where you're drawing, it's going to transfer the lines. And you can transfer these hole punch lines, but I always leave them off unless I'm ready to add them to my sketchbook. You can tape this down to your image and repunch those at any time. And then when you're transferring the common name and the scientific name, which are also optional, it's easiest to just outline the common name and then just write in the scientific name. So go ahead and transfer those if you like. When you're all done, go ahead and remove the graphite transfer paper, set it aside to use another time, and then gently remove the transfer image from the back of the watercolor paper. Take off the tape from the transfer image and set that aside. It could be used over and over as well. Keep your transfer image for protecting your painting while you're working. Now that you have all those lines transferred, go ahead and take your kneaded eraser and remove any unwanted smudges from the graphite transfer paper by just kind of moving it over. You can lighten the lines a little bit. Might smudge it a little bit too, just kind of erase over those areas if it smudges. There you go. And when you're all done and you like the way it looks, you can move on to step 2. Step 2, paint in the wettest, lightest layer of dandelion green. So first, mix the dandelion green. You'll shake up the color This is 14H yellow ochre. It takes 9 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then 1 drop of the 34H turquoise blue. 1. I always shake up the paint just in case some of the pigment has settled in the bottom. Use your preloaded water brush or some paint on your brush. Just go ahead and mix the paint. I don't add any water at this point. Instead, just mix it. Keep it highly dark and concentrated. And then I have some paint on my brush. Just go ahead and move my brush to a different part of my palette. And then I'll add some paint by gently squeezing on my brush, or maybe you have a cup of water next to you. And then you can go ahead and test that out after dabbing it on your towel and picking some up and then dabbing on your towel again. Test that out on your watercolor scrap paper. And I like that color, so I'll go ahead and add it in. And just add it in to all the areas as you see in step 2. And use this transfer image to protect your painting from any unwanted marks or smudges. And if it's too dark, if you think you're going a little too dark, just dab your brush onto your towel again and some of the paint will come off. And you can add a little bit of water on your towel with your brush as well. You don't actually want to add too much water to the watercolor paper itself. This is not meant for really a lot of water on it, because it's a thinner watercolor paper. Really works well for ink, which we'll be using at the end, and fine details. And so you can just pull that paint through, just kind of color it in like you would use a crayon or a marker. Just kind of pull it around, adding it in just like in the transfer image, the final reference image, and the image in step 2. I have too much paint, I have a little bit too much, a little too concentrated. I just dab it off onto my towel, and there's still a little bit left on there. Didn't fully clean it, and then it makes it a little bit lighter. Lighter, not as concentrated. If I put water on the brush, it would take the paint out. That's not really what I want. I just want it a little bit lighter. You can go a little darker or change this a little bit if you like, if you prefer. This is your painting, so you can choose what you want to do with it. And just a really, really light. I'm going to actually add some water to my brush on my towel. It's super, super light on those other stems there. There's a tiny bit of this green color in the middle of the seed head and on the bracts on the seed head as well. That would be easy to miss, so don't forget to add those. Now that you're done, you can let it dry and move on to step 3. Step 3, paint in a dandelion bright yellow. So you want to mix the Hansa Yellow Medium with a little bit of water to create this color. So 2 drops just to give myself a little bit to work with. And then just kind of add some water to it. Keeping it fairly dark for this, so you can test it out on your watercolor paper. Don't forget to dab it off onto your towel beforehand. And then just go through, referring to step 3's image and your final reference image as to where to add that. Be adding it on this flower head to all the little ray florets. And you'll be adding it to the ray florets on the flower bud and the seed bud, and then some of the stems. Once you've added all of the paint, you can let it dry and move on to step 4. Step 4, paint in the wettest, lightest layer of dandelion red blue. First, you'll want to mix the dandelion red blue. 8 drops of the 31H red oxide. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1 drop of the 34H turquoise blue. Mix that up. And you want to paint the lightest, wettest of that color. So go ahead and add some water to it in your palette to make it really light and wet. And dab it off onto your towel and test it out on your paint strip. Once you have a color you like, go ahead and dab it off onto your towel after picking some up and add it, as you can see in step 4. So a little bit on the leaf. Both leaves on the left here. And then on stems. And then the tips of the bracts. And then a little bit for the seeds that are here in the center to kind of represent those in there. In the center of the seed head. And once you have all of that added, go ahead and let it dry and move on to step 5. Step 5, paint in the wettest, lightest dandelion deep yellow and the driest, darkest dandelion green and red blue. So go ahead and mix the dandelion deep yellow with 8 drops of the 14H yellow ochre. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1 drop of the Hansa yellow medium. And so you'll want to test it on your test strip. I'll maybe add a little bit more water to mine. Looks pretty good. And then paint that color onto the flowers to add a little bit of contrast, as you see in your image, step 5 and your final reference image. See, just kind of adding it to the bottom of some of those ray florets and kind of sparingly throughout. And it doesn't need to be anything exact, like I'm just adding some kind of line strokes throughout, picking up a little bit more and then adding it to these other places on the flower bud and the seed bud as well. Just add a little bit more contrast. Maybe a little bit in the yellow areas that I painted in on the seed head as well. Now I want to go ahead and add some of the darker E from our last step, the dandelion red blue, to my painting. So I'll pick up a little bit of that, test it on my test strip here, and I'll add it as I see in step 5 and in my final reference image, being careful not to smudge any of the paint I just added. And it doesn't have to be an exact, just whatever it looks like it should be to you. Just go ahead and kind of draw that in with your brush. Making sure to clean your brush off between colors. Lastly, we'll add B, the dandelion green, the driest, darkest color of dandelion green, to the leaves and bracts as seen above. Make sure you're using a clean brush between colors and add the driest, darkest dandelion green B to the leaves and the bracts as seen in step 5 in your final reference image. So I'll pick up a little bit of that paint adding just a tiny bit of water to make it a little bit more pliable, dabbing it on my towel and then checking it out on my watercolor test strip. And making sure not to smudge anything I've already done. So if you need to wait for some of these to dry first, you should do that. And adding it in just as I see in step 5's image and in the final reference image. If it was a little too dry, like it was for me, didn't have enough water, wasn't really moving around the space, you know, just go back to your palette and add a little bit more water, pick up a little more paint. And again, making sure to dab it onto your towel before adding it to your painting. So just go ahead and go through and add all of that dandelion green. I realized I forgot to put some of that E color, the red blue, on the top of these bracts. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more of that. It's always okay to go back if you miss something and make a mistake or anything like that. You always have an opportunity to fix it if you need to, or you can leave it as it is, whatever works best for you. I think I want to add a little bit to this middle dandelion here too. If I missed anything else, I can always go back, but I think I've got it all. I'm going to go ahead and leave it the way it is, let it dry, and move on to step 6. Step 6, paint in the wettest, lightest dandelion red. So this color is just a drop of the red oxide. You can use 2 drops if you like. 1 drop should be sufficient. And then just add a little bit of water to it in your palette. And then take it to the side and add a bunch of water. And then test it out after dabbing it on your towel on your color test strip. And see if it looks good. I think that looks good to me. So I'll pick up a little bit more, dab it off onto my towel, and then add it as seen in step 6's image and the final reference image. It's a little bit on the stems and at the bottom of the filaries, the upper floral bract. Don't want it to be too wet because you don't want it to move everywhere. I'm going to add it onto these lower bracts as well, and maybe a little bit up here. Then we'll do the same with the rest, adding to the stem. And then to add it up here a little bit to this yellow area, to the little ray florets on the seed bud. And then throughout this green area, mostly in the bottom, the filaries. And then a little bit on caliculi. And the stem. And then lastly on the seed head stem. Also take a chance on this step to add any paint you might have missed at any point if you notice it now in your image. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it the way it is. I'm going to let it dry and move on to step 7. Step 7, add ink lines. So use the 005 black micron to add lines. You'll want to basically add all the lines you added when you transferred your image to the watercolor paper. So you can use your final transfer, your final reference image, and your transfer image as reference in addition to step 7A image. And so just go through and draw all those lines and outline the text, the common name, and write in the scientific name. Now that I've added all the 005 lines, I'll go ahead and move on to adding the 01 black micron lines. So I want to use the 01 micron to write the scientific name, and then just thicken a few of the lines as you see in A, so kind of the medium thick lines, just to add a little bit of contrast or to make something stand out. So you can see it maybe a little bit better in your final reference image as well. But anything that you really want to stick out, the center of the flower might have a little more shading, so we can add a few lines there. Maybe the right side of some of the ray florets, the bottoms. Once you have all of the 01 lines in that you like, you can go ahead and add some black 08 micron lines. These are the thicker lines you see throughout the image, such as this line here in the leaf, and then a few lines throughout, such as this line on the flower bud that I'm adding right now. Just adding a deeper level of contrast. So you can go ahead and add those lines and fill in the common name as well. We're done. We're done. Great job. You have created a painting that's unique to you. Next, you have some options what you could do with this. You can punch holes in it, add it to your sketchbook. You can frame it, gift it. Also, make sure to share it on our Facebook banner page. Check out the Nature Sketch Crate website to sign up for our newsletter and to shop for future crates. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun and had a chance to relax a little. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel.